Welcome back. Live from the ATX is back at it with another interview live from DreamHack Austin 2018. We've been promising a lot of exclusive content and a lot of stuff that you weren't going to see anywhere else, and we're delivering on a very high level today. Probably the one interview that I've most anticipated the entire time we've been here is this one. Right now, I am joined by the masterminds behind Gamechangers, Dreams of BlizzCon, John Keating and Peter Billingsley. The film is a Wild West Productions film. It is a documentary that is being released on June 12th through Amazon Prime, Google Play, and iTunes. And let me tell you, it is probably one of the most complex and just roller coaster ride documentaries I've seen in recent times. It's an honor to be interviewing you guys and picking your brain about it. If you can, introduce yourselves and what you did on the film.
I'm Peter Billingsley. I'm the producer of the film.
Mm-hmm. I'm John Keating, and I directed the film.
Very cool. I'm going to just start right off, get right out of the gate. Two messages in this. Gamechangers. It's about MMA and MC, two of the most world-renowned StarCraft 2 players, basically highlighting and documenting their trial and their journey through the 2014 World Championship Series League for StarCraft 2, and it essentially came to a halt at BlizzCon, which is what they were basically putting all their time, effort, energy into, and you guys captured it in the most dynamic and just respective way. The game and then the personal story. And you made a comment, John, right when we started talking a little bit ago, that it's almost not important unless you're focusing on the story. Mm-hmm. So right out of the gate, what drove you guys to make the film the way it was, and what drove you guys to position it to the audience the way that you did with the details, how it was laid out?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, when I brought this film to Peter, I was really amazed by the impact that this one single game had on Korea and the culture, the pop culture there. I mean, if you look back at what happened when StarCraft was released and what coincided with the PC bong movement there, also known as an internet cafe, but there it was a movement, it was a frenzy, and it changed the world in a way that we didn't really understand, and we're just now understanding now the profound impact of this one game on a country. And for us, it was understanding that there was this PC bong culture that grew up, and for us, we wanted to find two kids that grew up in this PC bong culture, and find out. Let's hear their stories. Let's hear their stories about how their road to becoming champions. And you find out that they used StarCraft and esports to lift themselves out of poverty. And there's that right there is an incredible story. And for us, it was no turning back. It had to be about StarCraft. It had to focus. If you're going to tell about a story about esports, it's got to be about StarCraft.
And he brought the film to you. What grabbed you about it?
Well, yeah, I was probably the perfect audience because I'm not a gamer. I'm not a big esports guy. I sort of have always looked at it curiously and respected the culture and the dedication of the players. But John and Zach's approach to the movie was it's going to be a very mainstream story. We're going to follow players pursuing their dreams. This happens to be the pursuit of esports. So it made me think of other documentaries like Spellbound about the spelling bee, right?
Yes.
Made me think of the Somalia documentary where they're chasing the title of being able to graduate and have a degree in wine. Even Hoop Dreams, which is about basketball. And all those movies, they're not for basketball fans or wine fans or spelling bee fans. They're human stories of people pursuing their dream and looking at the human aspect behind it, the sacrifices, everything that goes into that. So that was very appealing because I love those movies, and I think a lot of people do. Even The Short Game, the film about kids in golf.
Right.
You don't have to be a golfer. So in here, you don't have to be an esports enthusiast. If you are, you get incredible insight and the memories of what that journey was. And if you aren't, I think you get the first real look at what this world is and what it takes to make it in this world.
I think that speaks a lot to the film that you were able to not be a fan of esports and it still had some sort of relevance to you and what you think a great story is. How long have you been an esports fan? Or been involved with esports?
I started off, we made a World of Warcraft documentary called Race to World First years ago. And that's how I discovered StarCraft. I had to research, somebody had referenced the Team House and I had to go and research what that was. And when I did, I was like, oh my God, I want to make this movie. So that's where it all started. So as far as being a fan of esports, first and foremost, that's not what it was. I was a fan of this impact of this game. And I wanted to tell a story in this space because look at that, look at the changes it was causing. A single game, that's absurd. And gaming was even more trivialized then than it is now. I mean, much more trivialized. And so that was one of the challenges moving forward, but it was also, my perception, my involvement in esports really became an interest in its history. And that's, I think.
That was the other thing too. There's been some movies on esports, and I think people took an ironic look at the world, or almost inadvertently made fun of it because they don't understand it, or they'd look at esports athletes like they're odd or different. And these guys just really wanted to approach it as though they're very dedicated kids who are trying to get the dream of a world title, and who can't relate to that. So whatever your pursuit is in life,
you referenced PC bombs back in Korea. What those were essentially internet cafes on steroids, and the important impact of the Korea has on the esports, not just esports, but gaming world in general, is enormous. And StarCraft is kind of the backbone of that, and you get that a lot with MMA's story, and with MC's, I guess, particularly, not feeling like that's the only place that he felt like he could fit in. But you get two completely different characters. Like, they have the same story, the same strive to kind of find a connection, but you have kind of the older one, MMA, and the up and coming one that's trying to prove his stake in this battlefield. And you see the complexity of the lives that they live, and they match, but at the same time very different. One of the things that blew me away was that MMA is considered old, right, or almost out of shape, if you would, in the esports world, because, and he's only 27, or he was 27 at the time. And to me, one, that was an immediate reference to actual sports. Not that esports isn't, but you did mention that it was trivialized at one point, gaming was, right? Well, that culture to me is completely shifted, and it's no longer trivialized. It's just on a climb to being mainstream, just as mainstream as anything else. And when you go to statistics about it being more profitable than NHL and beating the US Open in terms of like ticket sales and pricing and things like that, this is a community and a movement that's established. Now it's just where it goes from there. This documentary speaks to that, and it also speaks to where gaming was a hobby. It's now a profession and something that people strive to be the best at. It's not just something you do with friends anymore. When you guys approached that, was there any fear that you were going to run into the setbacks that it comes to maybe putting somebody in a position, because they're essentially legends before you guys made the film, but they're also now getting this even more public eye, and they were essentially, well, at least for MMA, he was kind of on his way out when you guys did the documentary. So were you afraid that you maybe weren't going to get what you were looking for out of it, or did you have your sights set on just developing the product or the film, and they were the two you focused on?
Well, I mean, MMA, the reason that we focused on him is because he sat down in an interview for the first time with us, and he was the first person to say, "I want to win BlizzCon." Everybody else ducked it. Everybody else, well, maybe I could win BlizzCon, or I want to. He just looked us in the eye, looked us in the camera. I want to win BlizzCon. I want to hoist that trophy. I want to taste victory like I did that time. When we got that interview from him, we were like, okay, this is our guy. Yeah. And MC was just that was an obvious choice. Of course, you pick MC. He's the guy that, in Korea, everybody's very shy and retired, and you get these polite commentary and that sort of, and that's the norm.
He reminded me of like Conor McGregor in MMA.
For sure.
Right. But yeah, he's just a loudmouth. But that's the kind of stuff that sells esports now.
He's beloved. Yeah,
that's right. And it's just him. It's not an act. It's like a natural thing that's authentically who he is. So you have a great personality. It's almost like a movie in a way. Right. You have this great personality, secondary character, and you have this lead who's sort of like, Rocky almost, who's this guy who's kind of, thinks he's too old. Is he over the hill? Does he still have what it takes, to challenge for that title? And so you have kind of very traditional, almost narrative, mythic story elements within it. As two characters to pick to go through. I think we're very fortunate with what the outcome was, obviously, of MMA, and how far he got, to get down to those finals and to be competing for the title.
The beginning of the movie was a little different. It's like, all right, and then a guy hooked me. I was like, cool, this is probably the that really stood out to me. But what also stood out to me was MC's kind of cockiness to where he really thought he was the best, and yet he kind of knowingly didn't put in the effort, it seemed, or didn't like take it 100% serious. There was maybe that little bit of reservation. Did you guys have any insight onto that, on why that was, or was that just kind of part of his character as well? Because he's one of the best. Why not have that confidence in him?
Well, MC, now in hindsight, having seen the film, his one comment to us the other day, and I think it's pretty insightful, is that he has a lot of regret.
Yes.
You know, he looks back at this film and it highlights that regret. He looks back at what he should have done, and he went on to become a coach, and he heard himself saying things like, work harder, you have to work harder. And he heard these things coming out of his mouth, and he remembered hearing them as a kid, and he's, you know, from hearing that from his coach, and now all of a sudden he's saying it. And he realized that, you know, the coach isn't really important in the scene. It's the player's mind. It's one of his, you know, that's what's key. And also that he regrets not having pushed harder, you know, and you don't want to wrap up your careers with regret. So there's even more story after the film.
But that's a classic thing in any sport, right? You get to the top, and then how do you sustain it? Right? Can you maintain? It's why the greatest of all time have so many, repeated trophies, and a lot of guys can win a major championship in golf or tennis, and you see, and then they're unable to sustain it. You see it in boxing constantly.
With individualized sports, like team sports, not so much, or you might have one or two.
But in individualized sports, absolutely.
Combat sports, tennis, and they wear it very heavy.
All that drive to get you there, and in his case, the mom, the poverty, the tragedy that he experienced as a human being, and then you reach the pinnacle, then how do you sustain it? You almost believe, I'm good enough. I don't have to practice. I'm the best in the world. And so it's that cautionary tale of, you know, you get in life what you put into it. And I think it's insightful that he can recognize it in himself, because at the time he couldn't. And that was very authentic. The times he wasn't practicing, we didn't manipulate the documentary to give a perception. He even went to talk to a mentor beforehand and said, he knew he needed a jolt. His coach knew he needed a jolt. Said he's got to work harder. And he unfortunately got the result, I think, that puts into it. But probably, you know, makes him a better coach, because he's now suffered the defeat of that as a person, and he can speak from experience. Say, if you don't practice, you'll wind up like me in 2014.
Well, he quit. He's now no longer a coach. He quit. He's going to be a caster. Yeah.
Because I was going to touch on, he had a lot of the detailed experience when he was training in Germany. Like, he really touched on the training regimen. And was it your guys' idea? This is kind of a sidebar topic, but was it your guys' idea to get at the very beginning, when they're basically like stretching out, talking about the environment being really important? They need to kind of be isolated. You know, they have their regimen where they train for 2 hours, they'll go and do lunch, they train for another 4 hours. The stretching, the movement, their posture, you know, they were loosening up. I'm a big proponent of health and fitness surrounding esports, because and we actually work with a couple people that are pretty involved with that. Was it your guys' idea to highlight that? Because that's an aspect that I don't think a lot of people touch on, but that's one of those strengths that I think esports should really focus on.
You know, honestly, I was inspired by Pumping Iron there.
Oh, okay.
You remember?
Yes,
Did you see the Arnold Schwarzenegger and the ballet? I was like, we can do that here with this scene.
And it opens the movie. You know, I mean, it sort of sets the tone.
That connects with people, but to me, I'm like, yes, that's the reps that you have to put in before you have your game.
Well, to me, it also says, as the first scene, it's like, okay, take this world seriously. You know, you're instantly, the very first thing you see is stretching, preparation, and you hear a coach. If you close your eyes, he could be talking about a professional soccer team, a professional football team, a big mainstream sport, anything. And you realize it's esports, and if they're taking it seriously, then I think you begin to take it seriously as an audience. Right, I should dial in here, like, these guys are really committed. And it was about sort of absolving, looking at it as though it's some oddity. This is a very serious community of competitors, and we really wanted to make a film that highlighted that.
And you guys did so beautifully. And I think that if there's anything that really got me invested in it and really grabbed my attention, it's how you guys tied in the personal aspects. And I know you guys said you had your characters and they were the right fit. You guys mentioned specifically the socioeconomic state of Korea, right? And how crucial it is and how important it is for there to be productivity out of people there, in the sense that they've either got to work, do their military service, and provide for themselves, because it is strenuous and it is hard on people, specifically MC's mom. and her kind of, I don't know if I'd call it a midlife crisis, but it was definitely like an existential, point of giving up. And that on being put on MC and how he handled it, I thought he handled it well. He was very committed to making money for his family. But is it like that in all aspects, or is it just extra difficult because it is esports and it might be harder to, even though that's such a big thing in Korea, you would figure that that's probably a game changer over there, and it was for them. But I mean, how hard is the situations over there for people in the sense that, I mean, are they really breaking down like that constantly and having these rational thoughts of not wanting to continue? And you can kind of saw with MMA's down a little bit, so it's apparent.
Well, everybody's got a different place in their, in their role in society. But I think that they just had a desperate circumstance, and he had a tragic loss of his father at one, and that playing into the being poor and that sort of thing. I think what's unique about both of these have that in common, because MMA grew up poor as well. His father was committed to being a priest. So, every year they were getting into a smaller and smaller apartment in place, and that was part of the resentment, And I think that, I don't really know much about what's common there, but I know in these stories, these particular stories, you can see directly that esports is responsible for lifting this guy out of poverty. And I think that's fascinating. I mean, and it's also, validation of what he did and what he accomplished. And I think it's admirable the way he gave all that money to his mom. And, in Korea, that's what you do. Right. You give your money to your family. Okay. And so he would say stuff like that's a given. And I would hear that, and I'm not from Korea. And I would think, oh, that's not a given. You really just giving all your money to your mom. And I found that fascinating. So it gets highlighted because of that. And I'm like, this is just an incredible amount of compassion and commitment to your parents and your family. So let's talk about it, And the same thing occurred with MMA, and the way he would win money and just, here you go, mom, here you go, dad.
That was an interesting dynamic too with his father's, what his father went through, and he almost seemed like he was angry because of his father's decisions, but it wasn't like an anger, like he was. It was just like a disappointment almost. Mm-hmm. And that was how was getting into that when you guys found all that out and had that dynamic? Did it change like the tone of the film at all, or did you guys? Because to me it was kind of weird at first to have that thrown into the film and the religious aspect, but it all makes sense because the culture over there is a lot different than it is here, and that's very important to the family aspect. So were you expecting to get these like family issues so heavy when you went in with them? Like, because you said that when you brought on MMA, you wanted to be the champion of BlizzCon. Cool. You got to film it.
Well, let me ask you, Peter, because that was like, when we were doing this movie, Peter was a big part of the edit, and also a really great influence as an experienced storyteller. So I think that when it came down to that scene in particular, I think we all kind of had our own thoughts on that, and I think that what did you think about that scene?
Well, I think you had very well covered the A story, right? Mm-hmm. The competition. Right. But if you don't understand what's driving somebody, what's motivating somebody, it's not as interesting. In MC, you had wanting to come out of poverty, but MMA is another super relatable story to me, because a lot of us might feel pressure from our parents to take the road that they want us to take. Maybe it's religion, maybe it's going to college, or being a lawyer, being a doctor. And a lot of people don't want to do that. They want to pursue music, they want to pursue writing, they want to pursue their dream, whatever that might be. And so that's a very relatable pressure to have, and a difficult one to have to show up and compete and practice every day, in the back of your mind, knowing that you're probably letting down your family, you're letting down your father doesn't approve of you. And so that just dimensionalizes the character. And I think in his case makes him very likable, because he, struggled with it, but tried to return home, still gave money when he could, tried to participate. And also I think is inspiring because he did cut his own path. A lot of us don't do that. We'll kind of, and that might blow up eventually. If you don't choose your own happiness, your own bliss, your own path, it's fine if you want to do that career, but if you don't, it's going to manifest. And he did, and I understand why. And then, the film has a nice bit of closure where that's concerned, where the father opened up to John about how he really feels, and that kind of shows, the pride of the father. But in the end, to hear that he's really proud of him.
So he opened up to you personally.
Well, he opened up in the interview to say that, but it's like he's not saying it directly to his son, but he kind of says it to him through the film, which is also pretty classic. You learn later in life, like, your dad used to always brag about you. You're like, really? He never said it to me. It's like they say it to other people. Yeah, because it's your father and you want to be proud, and that was a difficult thing. And plus the pressure of the military there is very real, and you can only defer it for so long.
Yeah,
and that's knocking on the door.
Is there an option to not do the mandatory service? Because it's mandatory, right? You have
Nope.
to, and he did. So
you can delay it for like as long as I think right up until he was right at the end.
Yeah,
that was it.
Yeah, like 30, right?
27.
I think 27. It was literally right there. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was also very. And so did he did his service and is out, and obviously.
Yeah, he's all done. So he's back and he's going to make another crack at it.
But it's also a credit to them.
I was going to kind of touch on that a little bit, but Deanna was telling me that someone was making a comeback. So that's interesting. I was kind of thinking MC because he said he quit coaching. And maybe that was it. Well, hey, maybe it'll open up for like a. Do you guys have any ideas of a sequel, or would you guys even go that route if there was an actual? Okay, the last is coming.
Maybe.
Yeah. I mean,
maybe this was long. This movie took a long time to get made.
So let's touch on that a little bit. You were mentioning the process and kind of going through your own roller coaster of having the film even be put out. What lengths did you have to go through, and what was like the biggest struggle?
Documentaries are labors of love. I mean, getting them financed. Originally we were financed through a company that I was working with, and then that company fell apart. So then you're only a little bit on the way of the journey, and then you lose all of your funding. So then we were fundraising. Then I was funding it for a while personally,
which is like a no-no.
Which is a total no-no.
It's a total no-no.
We couldn't stop the train because I know if you kind of stop and say, "Oh, we'll get to it later," they're dead. You have to keep the heart beating of the movie at least a little bit. So we were able to scale down and just keep editing and push, and then we were able to raise some more money and some finishing, and that took a long time, and it takes a lot of effort. So they really are labors of love. There's nothing kind of Hollywood sexy about the making of those movies at all.
It's the whipped donkey in the entertainment business.
They're quite unglamorous and quite stressful. But, if you believe in the story and you want it to be told, you kind of find a way to get it done.
So being released on June 12th, when did you guys start? When was the start date? So how long in total from start to release?
When did you first talk about it? It was in...
It covers the 2014
Was it in
season,
Dallas?
So.
No, New York.
It was in New York, right?
Yeah. It was, I don't know.
Probably
It's 2012. Because
2012. We first spoke about the film.
Yeah, 2012.
And now we're sitting here, 6 years later.
That's awesome. And it is a labor of love, and I think it was done beautifully, and the promotion that you guys are doing for it seems pretty intense. It is a gaming-centric documentary. Obviously, it's centered on the gaming lifestyle. So instead of, like you were telling me prior to this, instead of going your traditional route, you guys are doing festivals, gaming festivals. You guys are hitting the gaming community rather hard because it does highlight them too. And then kind of going a more traditional route. It'll be available on Amazon Prime, Google Play, iTunes, and Vudu on June 12th. So what prompted you guys to go kind of off the beaten path and kind of go the other direction and attack gaming? Obviously, it's a gaming central film, but was that a strategy that you guys kind of developed at the end of promotion? Or the end
Somewhat.
Of wrapping it up and getting ready for promotion, or was it something that you guys...
It's also a celebration of gaming, so it was important to share it with the community.
Okay.
So we were in Katowice, Poland, and had sort of shared it there, and then to be here in Austin at DreamHack, it's you want to share it with the people that also are part of it and are part of the community.
Right.
I think in many ways first, and fortunately the response has been really positive.
Yes.
And then we'll take the momentum of this and then roll it into more. Yeah, I think the timing's great.
They have the StarCraft, there's a whole StarCraft setup that they got going on there.
It's the 20th anniversary, and Blizzard loves the movie.
Yeah,
They were down there playing with their rigs for a little bit. I heard that they
We were doing the world premieres tonight. So at 8:30 we're gonna be screening this movie here. So that's gonna be a big, that's going to be a fun thing to do, to see that. And here's the StarCraft fan base.
And the buzz is there too. Everybody's talking about it. I told you, we've seen everybody with some sort of literature on it, the flyers. People are really, really excited for it, and it's because it is an amazing film, and I appreciated it. I appreciated it as a piece of work, a labor of love, and To be honest, I'm not the biggest into esports. He's more of a gamer and esport fan than I am. And it grabbed me just because of the storytelling in general. It was an amazing film. Gentlemen.
That's cool.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot,
We
man.
appreciate you guys doing this.
Definitely, yeah.
So anyway, so where everybody can find it, obviously Amazon Prime, Google Play, iTunes, Vudu, June 12th. You can pre-order now.
You can pre-order now on iTunes, correct, and you can get a discount
Get it
on the
discount,
movie. So
$5.99,
grab it out.
$7.99.
That's right. Yeah.
So you get a discount if you pre-order it now. You'll receive it on June 12th. Websites, anything that you guys can blast out for that?
Well, it's Gamechangers Dreams of BlizzCon, and you can get us on Twitter. We use that a lot at Gamechangers Doc. Also Gamechangers Doc on Facebook. So it's pretty easy to use those. And yeah.
Where can they find you guys at? You guys have social media?
Not really. I don't really use
We're
it.
really using the film
Yeah.
from this standpoint. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Hey, if you guys are here attending, go to the debut tonight, 8:30. You said, right?
8:30 tonight. Yeah.
8:30.
Main stage.
We're actually going to do an interview tomorrow with MC and MMA. Obviously, going to be based around their gaming and what the future holds for them. Thank you guys again. We appreciate you coming in and doing this with us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.